AAA Live! AAA Live! AAA Live!
Ang palatuntunang maghahatid sa inyo ng kaalaman sa edukasyon upang magbigay liwanag at gabay sa ating mga mag-aaral at magulang.
Where your academic goals will be advanced and achieved. AAA Live!
Lilinang ng inyong talento at huhubog ng inyong husay upang magtagumpay sa karerang tatahakin.
AAA Live!
At ngayon, narito ang guro ng bayan, Attorney AMIHAN April ALCAZAR.
Good evening to everyone. This is Attorney AMIHAN April ALCAZAR, AAA Live, where your academic goals are advanced and achieved. So we are airing every Wednesdays from 7 to 8 in the evening. Please view us in Katipunan channel, Facebook and YouTube channels. Like, subscribe, and follow us. For tonight, we'll be joined by Dr. Carrie Ruth Humphreys. She's the Department Chair of the Department of Global Affairs and has a field of study in political science. So, Dr. Humphreys, maybe you can give some greetings to our viewers, students, parents, faculty, administrators, and stakeholders in the education sector.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here. We're coming to you from Martin, Tennessee. This is my home office where I have spent much of the pandemic for the last year and a half. So I'm excited to be with you all tonight.
Okay, thank you so much for giving us your valuable time. And so we're very much interested to have this important discussion because of, like, as you've mentioned, we've been under the pandemic for more than a year right now. So this digital technology is continuing to be very important to us, but we would like to continue our relationship even beyond our university. So firstly, maybe I'd like to ask you, as a young person, what sort of interest did you have, and how and when did you decide that you wanted to be in the field of study that you eventually pursued?
So my interest when I was in high school, I was in the French club and was taking French classes, and I was also on the debate team.
Yes.
And so that was really kind of some of my early interests that helped to get me to the place that I am today. I
Yes.
took my first trip abroad when I was in 10th grade. It was one of those EF educational tours. And that
Yes.
really just kind of cemented my whole, I want to do this again and again and again.
Yes.
And so those were kind of some of the formative experiences and exposures that I had. When I got to college, however, I was undeclared. I didn't have a set major in mind. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't one of those students who came in knowing exactly what I wanted to do and had a path. Instead, I spent those first couple of years just taking my general education classes, kind of figuring out, how do I take these interests in, debate and the world and French and turn it into something? And it was when I took my first political science class, which was Intro to International Relations, that I thought, like, this might be the way that I bring all of these things together. And so then I started, looking more into political science as an option, and kind of just went from there. Also, when I started college, I had a work study job. So it's essentially a scholarship where you can get a job on campus to help fund your education. And so my first job on campus was working in the study abroad office and the office that helped with teaching English as a second language. And I remember one of my first jobs is I had to drive international students to take their TOEFL exam, but it was like me and one student in a 12-passenger van. And it was so memorable because I was like, this is way too big and I don't know where I'm going. And so I've just kind of had these, international interactions and experiences and interests from the very beginning. So it just worked out that political science ended up being a really good fit, and I minored in French. So that really kind of helped take me in the direction that I ended up going.
Yeah. So you were talking about your experiential learnings early on as a young person. So what do you think would be the skills and proficiencies that the young person should develop in order to be in your field of study besides driving a 12-person van?
Yes, that is not a skill that is on my resume these days, but it was a very
Okay.
formative experience, to say the least.
Exactly.
I would say that, I would really encourage students to take advantage of as many experiential learning opportunities as possible.
Yes.
College goes by really fast, but don't say no to these opportunities, because these experiences are not likely to present themselves once you get into the workforce, right? I mean, there will be different experiences, but the types of experiences that you can have in college, through organizations, through experiences like Model United Nations, internships, travel studies, study abroad, I would really just encourage students to take advantage of as many of those as possible. When I was in college, study abroad was really expensive, so I didn't have the more traditional study abroad experience. Instead,
Yes.
a lot of students who were also minoring in French and that I had French classes with participated in a Teaching English in France program. And so I ended up applying for that, was accepted, and I took off a year between my junior and senior year of college and lived in France and taught English. So I kind of created my own experiential learning opportunity in a more non-traditional way.
Yes.
But I would just encourage students, like, whatever opportunities you have at your disposal, apply, right? I mean, you'll never know if you can get in and participate unless you apply. So definitely apply for as many as possible. In terms of skills and competencies that would be useful for political science and international studies, the ability to research is a really useful skill that will carry you in college and into the workforce. An awareness of different cultures and experiences. We can't live in bubbles. We really need to know about what's happening in the world and the experiences and situations in other countries and with other cultures. Also, a understanding of both national and international institutions, policy processes. Even in academia, right? There are institutions. We are an institution, but we also have institutions within our environment, and then our own processes, right? I mean, you kind of have to, once you understand one, you can kind of then dissect them in other situations as well. And then of course, communication, right? Communication is going to be another key skill to have.
Yeah. So you talked about those skills and proficiencies, and eventually, how did you leverage that when you had your career trajectory? Maybe you can tell us about why you actually wanted to be in the academic community eventually, and then using all of these competencies that you were able to develop as a young person in your career.
Absolutely. So my path was not a straight path, much like when I started college and I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was much the same when I got out of college. I was like, now what should I do? So I always tell my students, like, it's not just this linear straight line of like point A to point B, right? My path was like this, and for some of you it'll be straighter, for others of you it will be like me. But they're all good, right? They're all okay. And there's really no wrong path that gets you to a destination. And sometimes it's the little detours that add the most to your experiences. So, I tell them, don't shy away from that. But in terms of my career path, like I said, I graduated college. I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. So I was leaning towards grad school, figured I would start with a master's because I wasn't sure if I wanted to kind of lock myself in more with a PhD in teaching, or maybe get the master's and apply for the foreign service. So I decided, I'll start with the master's and kind of just see if I get like the light bulb of like, this is what I meant to do. So I graduated, took a year off because a lot of the political science programs that I was looking at wanted a stronger background in political economy, and I had only taken one economics class. So I thought, I could use a little break. So I'll take one or two classes, just kind of bulk up my transcript with some economics classes and put in my applications. So, that kind of, was the first little detour of like, okay, it wasn't straight from college to grad school. It was like college, year, then grad school. So
Yeah.
we moved to Utah. That's where
Uh-huh.
I took the accepted for my master's in political science. So I
Mhm.
spent 2 years doing my master's in political science, finished that, and still really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I mean, I had a lot of good experiences in grad school, but it wasn't, like I said, there still wasn't kind of that light bulb moment of like, aha, this is what I meant to do. So
Yeah.
after I graduated, they had kind of a dire situation where they lost an instructor, and so they came to me and they said, you know, we desperately need somebody to teach comparative politics. Could you teach comparative politics? And I was like, I don't
Yes.
know, can I? Am I qualified with a master's to teach, you know, at the college level? And they're like, you know, we're desperate. This is your area of expertise. So would
Yes.
you teach? And I was like, well, I guess this is one way to find out if I
Yeah.
want to teach or not, you know, is to just jump in.
Uh-huh.
So I taught that first class, and there was definitely a learning curve, right? I mean, going from being a student to being, you know, essentially behind the podium was a
Yeah.
very different experience, but I really liked it.
Mhm.
And so I
Just for
taught.
one semester of experience.
Yes, but they decided to keep me on. So they said, you
Uh-huh.
know, would you teach another class the next semester and then another class the next semester? So I taught for about 3 semesters before I decided that, you know, I think this is what I want to do.
Uh-huh.
But I don't want to do it forever as kind of an adjunct lecturer,
Exactly.
you know, where you have the piecemeal, you're never sure if you're going to have a class, and can you
Yeah.
really afford to live on the salary of an adjunct? So it was at that point that I decided to go back and get the PhD,
Mhm.
which I completed at Utah as well. So I did that, and that too was a bit of a, you know, kind of winding experience. The
Mhm.
job market wasn't great as I was approaching the end of my PhD, so I decided, you know, I'm going to apply for some fellowships and see if I can get some fellowships, and if so, I could tack on some interviews and, you know, go
Yes.
do some additional work for the dissertation,
Mhm.
which ended up happening. And so I spent some time in
Brilliant.
Europe doing some interviews, kind of stretched out the time that I spent on the dissertation.
Yes.
I was on the job market for 2 cycles before I was offered the position at University of Tennessee at Martin. So
Mm.
it was kind of a, you know, a long winding path, but I eventually ended up here at UT Martin, and I'll
Mhm.
be starting my 6th year this August. So I'll be coming up for promotion and tenure this year. So
Yeah,
it
so
is an
despite the
exciting
long
moment.
winding road, as you saying, it's the
Mhm.
process and not the destination, right? That really
Exactly.
inform your career trajectory. So in terms of personal quality, so we were talking about like, you know, those competencies that we can develop as young people. What
Mhm.
would be the personal qualities that you think a young person should to have a certain measure of aptitude and eventually success in your field of study and career?
I would say one of the biggest things is that you need to be curious about the world, right? So
Yes.
if you have this curiosity of like, you know, why did they do this, or like, what are they doing and what is this, then that is kind of a hallmark of like, this might be a good fit for you, right? You're curious, you want to know more about why we
Mm.
do the things we do, and is this the best way to do it? Are there other ways? Could we possibly, you know, seek those out?
Mhm.
And that kind of dovetails into the next one, which is to have a willingness to ask questions, right? And a desire to learn new things. So it's kind of that curiosity paired with, okay, well, I'm going to ask these questions, right? I'm not just going to sit here and observe. I'm going to ask a question, whether it's an easy question, a complex question, and I want to learn, right? I'm going to ask, and I want to learn about all of these things in the world, because the world is a huge place and there's so much to learn. And so having that curiosity and the desire to ask questions and to learn is huge.
Mhm.
I would also say that even if you don't have research skills, if you have an interest in research, and this could be something as simple as following the news, right? Because that kind of ties in with that curiosity and asking questions, is
Yes.
you're following what's happening in the world, right? You're watching the news or YouTube, or looking at, you know, like the BBC, and just seeing like what's happening out there.
Yes.
And that could be politics, it could be culture, it could be the environment, but just an interest in like what's happening, and doing some basic kind of keeping up with what's happening in the news, which of course then can dovetail to turning those into more marketable research skills as
Mm.
well. So I would say
Yes.
those are some of the top personal qualities that would really make somebody a good fit for political science and international studies.
So of course, this all leads up to, are we in a position now to actually dispense some of our well worth advice to young people on how they can develop themselves, prepare, and in fact, go into your field of study. So in terms of like advising, of course, you're now in position to be a mentor to students. So maybe you could also give some of your insights as to how they can be in your field of study and career if they so choose to.
Absolutely. So I would say that political science and international studies are very approachable majors. They are not majors that scare people off with, in intense math or perhaps, like scary science. These are majors that are really approachable for anybody, regardless of what they think their strengths or weaknesses are. And we often come to find out through college, right, that what we think are our weaknesses are not actually weaknesses, right? They're just areas where we have like a mental road block of thinking that they're going to be really challenging, and then we overcome them and you have that sense of accomplishment. But they're very approachable majors. So I would say, don't be afraid of thinking about these as potential majors, even if you haven't really been exposed to them in previous, high school, junior high types of situations. And also I would say, don't be afraid of change, right? Students often think that once they pick a major, they're stuck, right? That they're locked in with needing that major and just, continuing through, even if they get a year in and they're suddenly like, oh, like I might have made a mistake, I'm not sure I'm as passionate about this as I once was. I have a lot of students who end up switching to political science and international studies who, had started down the nursing track or were a math major or were an English major. And, they were very scared about making that change. But once they did, they felt a lot better about their situation and the things that they were learning and were excited about it. Right. I mean, you want to be excited about what you're studying. And if that means making a change, don't be afraid of making that change. So, those would be kind of my first two is these are very approachable majors, give them a shot. Don't be afraid of changing your major, even if you think you have started down a path and you decide it's maybe not the best fit. Something that echoes from when we were talking about experiential learning is take advantage of all the opportunities, right? Even if you are still in, say, high school, there's lots of opportunities available. And then once you transition to college, continue to take advantage of those opportunities. It's amazing how many students day in and day out go to class, go home, do their homework, never join organizations, never realize that there are travel studies, study abroad opportunities, that there's scholarships. So for example, here, as part of student fees and tuition, it goes into a pot of money that then students apply to for travel study and study abroad. And I don't think a lot of our students realize that this is essentially their money, right? That they've been paying in for the last several years. And I tell them, like, you should definitely take advantage of that, right? You've paid into the system, so go and travel and see the world, or go, or participate in an internship, and there's scholarships for that. So take advantage of all of that, right? You never know until you try, and it can be such an eye-opening, life-changing experience, whether it's within the country, out of country, and the networks and the people that you meet make it immensely worthwhile. So take advantage of everything. And my last piece of advice would be, use your instructors as resources, right? So often students kind of are fearful of approaching their teachers or their professors, but we love it when you come talk to us, and we want you to come ask us questions related to the class, not related to the class. Come and ask us, like, I saw this in the news, or I've always wondered about this. Do you know anything? Could you, show me where to learn more about it? Or even just to talk about TV shows, right? I mean, some of the best conversations I've had with students are about pop culture and nothing related to,
or
nothing related to political science. It's like, let's talk about our favorite TV shows. So don't be afraid of interacting with us outside of a classroom setting, because we really enjoy those conversations, and it can be a great way to build that kind of mentoring experience for all of us. So that would be some of my advice that, looking back, I would say, is kind of a good, well-rounded, anyone can benefit from.
Exactly. And finally, you did mention about the pandemic and how we actually had to immediately make a transition of something that we had not been used to. We did have digital technology, but to have a virtual reality that we had to deal with. And now, of course, we may again reintegrate. So, how do you foresee digital technology being a beneficial tool to the delivery of education for young people, as well as an advantage that they should really leverage in your particular field? Yes.
So I think one of the things that the pandemic has showed us is that we can still make connections even if we can't be there in person. And it's still immensely important to build those connections, right? Whether they're digital or face to face. And I think in some ways it broke down barriers. So for example, I take students to participate in Model United Nations, and usually we do kind of this Southern Conference where, colleges and universities from around the South all gather in Charlotte, North Carolina, usually in the spring for like a 4-day,
Experience.
experience, kind of insight into how the UN works. And
Yes.
of course, this year and last year, we couldn't go in person because it just wasn't safe enough to. And so the organizers were great. They set it up virtually on Zoom, and it actually worked out better because schools who otherwise couldn't afford the travel, or it was too far for them to travel, were able to participate. And so we actually had a more diverse group of colleges and universities participate in this virtual format than we usually do in the face-to-face. So I think in terms of breaking down distance barriers, cost barriers, the digital technology really lends itself well to that. And so I hope that we will continue to take advantage of that part. So integrate both kind of face-to-face options, but also digital options.
Hybrid,
Continue to have webinars and exchanges like this where we can have, conversations and reach audiences that are in different countries, and, take advantage of those experiences. It doesn't always have to be face-to-face. And I hope we will continue to remember the value that these types of digital interactions have brought this past year and a half, and kind of do more of a hybrid model where we do face-to-face where possible, and then we can sprinkle in, interject these awesome digital opportunities where possible as well.
Yes. So I think we've had such an exciting, actually very unique experience from like this whole academic year. And so thank you so much, Dr. Carrie Ruth Humphreys, of course, for the time that we have spent together working on the initiatives for global affairs. Maybe you could also tell us a little bit about the objective of your department, Global Affairs at the University of Tennessee in Martin.
So within the College of Business and Global Affairs, I am the chair of our Global Experiential Learning Council. And so we are trying to promote within our college more and more opportunities for our faculty and staff. Because we have found that some faculty, like myself, kind of disproportionately participate and encourage these opportunities, and other faculty are a little bit more hesitant, are a little bit fearful of like the workload, and a lot of our faculty have themselves not been abroad, so there's that barrier as well. And so we're trying to make it more accessible for students and faculty to have a variety of opportunities, including some webinars, kind of take some baby steps of like, let's do some webinars between our university and universities in the Philippines or Japan, which April has been so great to make contacts for us with, and then move towards doing some more exchanges where our students could go abroad, their students could come visit us in Tennessee. But it's very much a building process. Of course, the whole pandemic has really just halted everything. But even before that, we were in a transition phase where the way we were doing things wasn't as sustainable as we would have liked it to be. And so then, that was already problematic. The pandemic just stopped everything. So it kind of offered us a blank slate of, like, okay, what can we do to best serve our faculty and staff within the college to offer as many opportunities as possible for them. So we're exploring, kind of the same advice that I gave everyone watching, take advantage of all the opportunities, explore all of these different paths, and just see, what we can take away from these opportunities that are before us.
Yes. So thank you so much, definitely, for all of your insightful discussion. And I look forward definitely to all our initiatives that we have started and hopefully can sustain for the future. So again, maybe last words to our viewers, again, the stakeholders of the education sector, Dr. Carrie Ruth Humphreys, please.
So final words. This has been an amazing summer to have April visit us, and she has been so awesome at hosting talks, bringing people together to have good conversations about educational opportunities, particularly experiential learning, but even just kind of leveraging people we already have on campus, right? So it's not always that we need to bring, somebody from the Philippines, although she is welcome back anytime. But we have a lot of diversity and international backgrounds, even amongst our own faculty. And so even just taking advantage of kind of our internal UTM family to a better degree than we have, I think is going to be a great benefit for our university, and then also for the eventual students that we'll be hosting on our campus as well. So these types of opportunities, the Fulbright exchanges, these types of webinars, interviews are all amazing things that contribute to education for students, faculty, and other stakeholders. So we're very appreciative.
Yes, thank you so much for such a wonderful time here at the University of Tennessee Martin, and I'm certainly looking forward to speaking to you again very soon. Okay, so we'll be right back to our viewers. Thank you. We're back here at AAA Live, where your academic goals are advanced and achieved. So this is Attorney AMIHAN April ALCAZAR, and we're live here at Katipunan channel. You can follow, and subscribe to us at our YouTube and Facebook channels. We're airing every Wednesdays from 7 to 8 in the evening. So I'm here at location of the offices of the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences, joined by the Dean, Dr. Shadow Robinson. Maybe you could give some greetings to our viewers who are faculty members, students, administrators, and stakeholders of the education sector. Dr. Robinson?
Sure. I just want to say thank you for having me on, and thanks to all of you out there for all the work you're doing trying to support the educational goals of your institution wherever you may be. I know it's been a very challenging year, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing here and impressed by the work that we've done in higher education and education in general across the globe.
Yes, thank you so much for giving us your valuable time. And so I'm very, very interested to know more about your background, because I know that is really something so interesting for our viewers to know about. So as a young person, maybe you can tell us, what were your interests, and when and how did you decide that you wanted to study your field of study?
Sure. So I was very fortunate in that my father was an engineer. And so growing up young, I would go to his office, and he was a civil engineer, and I would look at all these drawings and see all the math scribbled.
Play with his
And
things.
one of my earliest pictures is holding his pencils and some of his drawing tools at his drafting table.
Yes.
And I was fortunate to be good at science. And so growing up, I always thought I might follow in his footstep and be an engineer.
Yes.
And when I was 12, 13 years old, I thought I might do that, though I thought I might play professional baseball.
Okay.
Very big sport fan.
Of course, for the young boys.
But I found myself falling in love with mathematics, and I wanted to do something interesting with mathematics. And when I was in junior high, around 12 or 13 years old, I read a book with the title something like, "So You Think You Want to Be a Physicist?"
Oh, yeah? Really?
I read the book, and the answer was yes. And as I was reading through it, it was just the most exciting thing to think about, using all of your skills in mathematics, always trying to learn more mathematics, but using it to try to understand how the world around me worked. And at that time, I decided I wanted to do physics. I didn't want to do anything but physics. I almost quit playing sports. My friend group probably changed because I wasn't on the sports teams anymore, but I was more in the on the academic teams instead of the athletic teams. And I started reading my parents' books. And so, throughout my last few years of high school before I went to the university, I knew I wanted to do physics, and I pursued it all the way through.
So based on your experiential learnings that you've mentioned from a young age, what skills and proficiencies do you think should be developed by our young people if they wanted to be in your field?
Sure. I think mathematics is one you'll find nearly everyone in physics has some kind of passion for.
Yes.
I think probably even a bigger need, though, is a real curiosity and love of learning and how to understand the universe around you.
Yes.
I've known some people that were very strong in all of the academic subjects, but they didn't have the intellectual curiosity to want to read more, to want to understand more. They were content to do their work and just be done.
Yes.
And the people I found most successful were those that would ask more questions.
Yes.
They would go do more reading. If they couldn't find the answer, they would go look for it. And I think that intellectual curiosity, of course, along with the technical skills with math, and now I think in the discipline, computer programming is probably the second most important skill that you could probably have beyond the
computer
curiosity.
proficiency, definitely.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that when I was starting my path, not everyone had that proficiency, many did not.
Yes.
Whereas I think now it is everyone comes out of the programs knowing how to write some computer codes, knowing how to manipulate various computer software packages to, one, help with the math, but also to help with the visualization of very complex topics. And many of us humans are visual thinkers. We want to see it in front of us. And a skill set with computers can make that so much easier.
So can you also tell us about your career trajectory? Because you said you had this interest in mathematics and then eventually the use and application of mathematics to understand the universe, which is really like what physics is all about. So what kind of career trajectory did you undertake, and eventually how did you decide that you wanted to be in the academic community?
Sure. So when I fell in love with science, really, as that early teenage student, I started taking as many math courses as I could and asked for extra constantly. I was fortunate, like
Challenge.
I said, and my dad was an engineer, and so he was able to teach me mathematics that my school actually did not cover. And so I went to the University of Kentucky and pursued degrees in mathematics and in physics. And after, I actually originally thought I might do a degree in computer science as well, and someone pulled me over and said 3 is one too many. Maybe do 2 and then pick up the skills you need in the other, and that's what I chose to do. And so after I finished those 2 degrees, I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey and completed my PhD in theoretical nuclear physics, which was the discipline that I fell most in love with. I loved them all, and it was hard to pick.
So you wanted to do both.
I wanted to do everything. But followed that path. But in the course of that path, I thought I wanted to be primarily like a research scientist, maybe work at a large laboratory.
Sounds like a rocket scientist.
I would have thought that would be one possible path. And then as a part of the requirements of my program, it was required you also teach because so many jobs were in
Yes.
academia for physicists.
Yes.
And I loved that experience. I loved that experience almost as much as I loved my research. Some days I loved it more.
Really?
The opportunity to really help others understand.
Mm-hmm.
I got as big a thrill out of that as when I understood things myself.
Uh-huh.
And so I changed my trajectory halfway through graduate school
Mm-hmm.
to look for an area where I would be allowed to continue my research interest,
Mm-hmm.
but I would be spending at least half, if not more, of my time actually in the classroom teaching others,
Mm-hmm.
helping them develop their own skills and understandings so that they could go off and do all kinds of interesting things, not just the kinds of things I was interested in,
Mhm.
but others. And in a real way, it felt like I got to participate in more disciplines that way.
Yes.
I got to participate in more ideas. I wasn't just a nuclear physicist, which was my training, but I was also a biophysicist because some of my students went and did that. I was
Yes.
also involved in neurosurgery because some of my students went and did that.
So you were able to partake of what their interests were.
Yeah, and really understand those disciplines, because when you build that relationship as a mentor to a student, they are so excited to come back and share what they know with you. And so I've been able to make these wonderful connections with people in all these different scientific disciplines that had I not gone into a career where teaching was a focus,
Yes.
I would have never gotten to enjoy that.
Yes, and so at first, of course, its a career trajectory was both on the theoretical part, really understanding it as a student, and then eventually as a graduate student, and then eventually, as you said, you fell in love with the teaching to make other students understand it better. So what then prompted you to eventually take on a leadership position from the teaching and the learning?
I think as I'm talking about it right now, it's almost the same thing that led me into the classroom is the ability to have the bigger impact.
Yes.
That as a research scientist, I was contributing as well as my talents would allow into the narrow branch of theoretical nuclear physics.
Okay.
And then once I was teaching, I was now contributing to branches that were highly associated with physics,
Yes.
but weren't my particular very narrow branch. And when I had an opportunity, as many faculty do, to serve and to help the university do its
Yes.
business, I found that when I could help one of my faculty colleagues by perhaps I made a change that gave them 10 extra minutes in a day,
Yes.
or we did something that helped them be more productive with their workday, that now I was not only impacting my students,
Yes.
but I'm impacting their students. Even though I've never seen them, I've never been in their classroom, I do not know their disciplines in some cases at all,
Yes.
but I'm able to enrich their experience as students and eventually as professional practitioners, sort of behind the scenes. And I loved that. I love that sense that I was helping every one of the students by helping the faculty do their work. And so about 10 years into my career as a faculty member,
Yes.
I began taking on more and more leadership roles because I felt I was having the biggest impact on our students and our faculty in that role, even more than I was able to have as a classroom teacher.
So, what do you think would be the personal qualities? Because we're talking about skills and proficiencies and what you should know in terms of like competencies. But now we're talking about like the integrated development of the student or the learner. What personal qualities do you think should be developed by the young people if they really want to be in your field? You mentioned about the possibility of being a scientist, then of course a professor or teacher, and then eventually someone in a leadership role when it comes to the development of the sciences.
I think one of the things that is consistent throughout that from either a research scientist or all the way through the different career paths I've been is a curiosity, a wanting to understand more. I mean, I became a scientist because I wanted to understand the universe.
Okay.
I became a teacher and loved it because I was curious about all these disciplines that I would not normally get to engage. And I think to the extent that I can be effective as a leader, one of the important roles is a curiosity about what those around me need, understanding their work, where their passions are, what is it that I can do to help them. And I think one of the things that has mattered a lot in my career as a teacher and as a leader is really a passion for service, of wanting to help others and deriving personal pleasure when I see someone else succeed. Even if I don't get any of that success or glory or popularity or awards reflected back on me, knowing that I help them gives me the great personal satisfaction in measure that I never had even for my own accomplishments
Mhm.
sometime. And I think if you find that you're that kind of person, that you really will enjoy taking on a leadership role.
Mhm. So, for instance, if you were on the cusp of making that kind of decision,
Mhm.
as a young person right now, because we're talking about the decision-making process of what informs young people about what fields of study they may be interested
Mhm.
in, or the career trajectory, what sort of advices can you give to our young people?
I think one of the pieces of advice that I used to give my students when I was a full-time classroom teacher is to try to find a few minutes a day where you can clear your head away from your devices, away
Mhm.
from your friends, and walk around and really listen to what you hear in your head, what you hear in your heart. Because often, if you can find that quiet place, your brain will tell you what you're interested in. If you're not sure if you want to study, say, mathematics or accounting or maybe law, if you can have 5 to 10 minutes to just walk around without any noises, any distractions, you'll probably find your mind wanting to think about one of those things. If, like I did as a youngster, you find that your brain is wanting to play with numbers and
Yes.
you're multiplying numbers that you see on road signs because it's something that makes you happy,
Yeah.
your brain is trying to tell you something.
Mhm.
Or if instead you're remembering things that you read about court cases and the arguments that were made that won or lost court cases, again, it's your brain trying to tell you something about where your passion really lies. Because if you're able to understand that about you, about what really resonates in you, that will give you the strength to carry through when things are difficult. If you don't have that sort of resonance with your sense of purpose and what you're trying to do, I think it's much more difficult to carry through when as things will. They will be challenging as a student. It will
Definitely.
not be easy all the time.
Mhm.
But if you know why you're doing it, and if you're doing it because it's something you truly want to do,
Yes.
that's going to pull you through.
Yes. One of the challenges, as we've mentioned earlier, was having to experience in a worldwide experience for the pandemic. And it's really to accelerate the digital technology that was already existing even before COVID. But now there seems to be an acute necessity to face the digital technology as part of our lives. How do you think this will impact insofar as the delivery of academic programs are concerned, and also the development of the personal integrated developments of students when they are dealing with this kind of delivery of academic programs?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we're seeing is that folks are having to be very creative with things that maybe 5 or 10 years ago we knew in our heart was impossible to do online.
Yes.
And then we had no choice. If we were going to do
Yes.
it at all, it had to be done online. And the answer is that, some things clearly are better in person,
Yes.
but it could almost always be done online. If it has to get done, it can happen. And I think one of the great things about that is because it's been forced upon so many, we have
Yes.
had the opportunity to really think through creatively how to make these things happen
Yeah.
in a way that we would have never pushed ourselves to do beforehand. And then I think as it impacts students, I think there's some really huge positives and some really concerning negatives that I have. I think one of the positives I have is if you have that kind of curiosity that I was talking about earlier, you've got access to so much more than you would have 5 years ago, 10 years ago. As so much
Exactly.
material is being put online. If you decide tonight, I want to learn calculus, I've always wondered what it is. You can go find high quality materials that will help you learn calculus. I think one of the things we lose out on, and I've talked to my colleagues about this,
Yes.
is so often our best ideas, our best, new senses of direction have come from one-on-one or small group conversations when really we're talking about something else. We had to get together, we had work to do, we did it.
Yes. But
And then in between, when we're taking a break or maybe
yes.
getting up to go walk and pick up the pizza, we talk about other things and we make connections that we would never do in a virtual setting. Because in the virtual
Exactly.
setting, often we get together, we do our work,
Yes.
and then we disconnect.
Yes.
And in person, we have those connections. And so many of my faculty colleagues and so many of my students have talked about how they've missed that, after the meeting or after the class time.
Interaction. Yeah.
The interaction of humans that really helps you generate all this different stuff beyond just accomplishing the task at hand. And I think it's given me and many of my colleagues a new appreciation for those opportunities.
So now that we're not saying that we're over the hump yet, but there's going to be like this possibly next normal in the sense of now we will have to really face the fact that a lot of the programs and its deliveries have been changed because of our experience with the pandemic. How do you foresee this hybrid form of education really impacting the sustainable development in the future of what we're looking at for the new generation of learners?
Sure. I'm hoping that it's helped us see that some things are just better digitally in a way, and that it's much more immediate, it's much easier to deliver. And in the classroom setting, in the professional setting, that you don't have to all get together all in the room all the time.
Yes,
That
yes.
there are ways to, if it's, if I had a 20 slide PowerPoint show I wanted to show, I could probably record that and send it to you.
Yes.
And it would be just as good. What we would miss is the one-on-one interaction afterwards. So it doesn't mean that we don't want to get together,
Yes.
but it means that we don't have to be together every time there's some sort of information exchange. And I've seen that in the way my university works. I've seen that in the way some of the classes are going to work. Even some of my colleagues who 2 years ago would have told me they would never, ever, 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 ever teach online.
Yes, and they have.
And they have now, and they've indicated that they're going to try to deliver some of their information digitally, because, as he said, it's like what I'm really interested in is the talking about it that we can do after everyone has seen it.
Yes.
And in the past, he would spend 80 or 90% of his time
Talking about the
talking
knowledge,
about
right?
it, and then they would only be 10%, 15% of the time left. And if he can find a way to make it that he doesn't want to put everything online because he's got some things he needs to do in person. But if he could
Sure.
get 50% of it digital, then that gives him 50% of the time with the students to actually engage the material. And kind of like I did as a youngster with my dad's engineering stuff, right?
Yes.
You play with it.
Yes.
You figure out the different things that's possible, and you can really bounce it around. Whereas in a traditional classroom where you sit there and you listen to the teacher for 50 minutes,
Lecture, yes.
and you get up and leave, you've not played with it. You've only received material.
Yes.
And,
Very passive learning.
yeah, it's one of the examples I use for my students sometimes is that I used to take guitar lessons, and I could go watch my guitar teacher play for 50 minutes. I wouldn't be any better. I might feel bad because I couldn't do that, or I might think, oh, I think I know how to do it. And then I would go home and get my guitar by myself without my teacher around.
Yes.
And maybe I picked up 10% of it. Whereas if I could spend the time trying to play for my teacher and
Yes.
talking about what I was trying to do, then my teacher could say, yes, yes, no, no, not that.
Yes.
And then really focus in on places where I could improve.
Yes.
And I think if we've learned our lessons from the pandemic, it's going to have that same sort of transformative effect on
Yes.
education. It's not 50 minutes of watching a teacher. It's 50 minutes of an opportunity to learn.
Yes. So talking about like that opportunity to learn, and you having been really trained as a theoretical nuclear physicist, okay, a rocket scientist. So maybe we can talk about like how to actually leverage educational expertise in part because of the leadership position that you hold, insofar as informing science education. And this is especially true when it comes to the K-12 education, because you know how like most young people, if not even the teachers, would have this adverse reaction firstly to mathematics or even sciences. So how do you foresee it's possible to leverage the educational expertise that you have now in the universities in order to inform and improve science education in the K-12 system?
Sure. I think one of the things that I'm hoping, and I'm seeing it happen on my campus, is that there is an understanding from the university side
Yes.
that universities used to just sit here and say that when you come here, you need to come here at place X, and we will take you to place Y.
Yes.
We have nothing to do with what happens before you get here. We have nothing to do with what happens after you get here. We have a 4-year responsibility to you.
Okay.
And I think a lot of universities are understanding that's not true, that they have a responsibility to their region. That, here we're located in rural Northwest Tennessee, and we are responsible in some way for the future of this entire region. And a big part of that future is what happens at the K-12 education level. And so as that understanding has matured, what you find is more, PhD research level scientists or other STEM professionals really want to be involved in what happens there to help the teachers understand that, and the students, that it's not just this inert body of knowledge that you're getting. It's not just words in a textbook.
Yes, definitely.
One of my favorite things I used to say to my students on the first day of class is, I'm not a science teacher, I'm a scientist who teaches.
Yes.
And that has a big difference, that this isn't stuff that I took classes in, that I memorized, and now I'm in charge of making you do the same.
Yes.
But it's material I actually know and I use every day, that it has a real practice for me. And I've got faculty in engineering here, faculty in math, faculty in chemistry and physics and computer science, all that are the same mindset. You know, one of my biology professors just a week or two ago was in a high school setting up, helping them understand a way to think about biology not as a bunch of terms to memorize
Exactly.
and a bunch of processes to be able to draw on the test sheet,
Yes.
but an actual way of helping understand the universe and how the human body works. And that mindset change has been relatively recent, I think, in higher ed. Maybe over the past 20 or 30 years, there's been a real understanding that we can't just sit here and say that you show up here when you finish high school, we'll have you for 4 years, and then we'll send you on your way. That there really is a responsibility to the areas. And that's what the future of, I think, American public higher education is going to be. And I think for a lot of the globe, that's what public education needs to look like, is a responsibility to the public that we serve.
So when we're talking about, of course, like the feeder schools in basic education, and then eventually, of course, is workforce training and development when they leave the four-year institutions or the universities, as you said, talking about the differences in terms of the paradigm shift of what our role and responsibility is going to be in higher education. How do you also see, like, within the ecosystem of having this technical education, having a relation to higher education, in addition to improving the college readiness skills when they're coming out from the K-12 or the feeder schools in basic education?
Sure. I think one that we find with, you know, just the economic future of a region, that if you can have all of the college educated population you want, and if you don't have in parallel with that a very strong technical education and a trade skill set, that it's really hard to make your economy go, right? It's the economy requires all aspects of this. And so the universities need to understand, and I think we're getting better, that it's not everyone needs a 4-year college degree.
Yes.
That many people do, but not everyone does. And you know, maybe our admissions people don't want me saying that, but
Yes.
you know, it's important to understand that we need to work as partners. And so one of the things that we have worked on in a couple of places is partnering with some of the technical schools. And so some of those technical skills are some of the same skills that we would teach you in a 4-year university. And if you've got those skills from that experience and you want to come to take our classes, we will give you credit. But it doesn't mean you have to come and get them here. You can go through the technical school and pick up the trade skill along with some of the technical skills, along with some of the skills you would have there. And for many of our population, that becomes the off-ramp into the workplace.
Exactly.
That you've done that and you go in. Or you might do that for a while and then think, you know, I want to advance my career. I want to maybe change my career a little bit. So I want to go back to the university. It's important that universities don't always go, well, you got to start from scratch because you didn't start here. That it's important to say, it's like, okay, you don't know this at the beginning, but you already know all of this much more complex stuff over on the other side. Let's be sure that you get credit for it, so that I'm not saying that you have to start over, because that's a very difficult thing to do, especially as an adult, to be told you have to start over. And how many people don't improve their life because they're told they have to start over every year? It's depressing, and we're working really hard to be sure that that's not the mindset and it's not the way we operate anymore.
Okay, so how do you also try to improve the attitude of most young people, if not even adults, towards breaking down the barrier to learning mathematics and science, which is a challenge in itself, because the STEM courses would always have far fewer students who would want to study it compared to the other disciplines?
You know, one of the things that I've been pushing for as an educator much of my career, especially on the math side, because math is one of those strange things that no one would ever, well, some might, but very few people would walk into a party and say, you know, I don't read. I'm not good at reading. Reading's not for me. I don't like it. It would be a unique individual that would feel comfortable saying that in a large group setting. Whereas it's very common to do that with mathematics, to go say, oh, I'm not a math person, I just don't like math, it's not for me. You hear that all the time. And so one of the things that I've been pushing for at the university level, and would love to see more of it at the high school level, is to not always focus in mathematics on the highly proficient technical skills, but rather an understanding of, you know, what people do with this. You know, it's like, why does this even matter? You know, algebra, why would anyone care? Calculus, why would anyone care? Geometry, why would anyone care? And if you can show people that there are these applications, everyday applications, not strange esoteric things from theoretical nuclear physics,
Yes.
but everyday things that you can see just walking around outside when you look at a construction site, or if you look at the way someone's laid out a garden.
Yes.
The
What's happening there?
The mathematics that's hidden within that is sometimes fairly advanced mathematical topics, and folks have an appreciation for the outcomes of them. And so I have found in my own career that having the conversation like that really breaks down a lot of the barriers. Now, it doesn't make you technically proficient,
Sure.
but you're never going to be technically proficient if you're not interested in math. It is a difficult
At
subject.
the very least.
Yeah, and one of my favorite lines to folks is one of the challenges with math is it's the language the universe has written its story in, and there are no native speakers. And so, anytime you learn a second language or a third language, you have that translation process you go through in your head trying to figure out, well, what's the right way to say this?
Yes.
All of us are doing that with math. It's a very similar barrier that we face, and we don't have a native speaker that we can go get help with, but we do have nature. Nature is maybe the one native speaker, and nature can show us places where this story is really interesting. And if you want to get good at this, here's a reason why you might care about this. And I don't think math education throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it was so focused on technical proficiency.
Yes.
Get all the answers right all the time. And I think that sort of drove a lot of creative people away from mathematics. And I think the best mathematicians I know are very creative.
Creative, actually.
Yeah, they put together ideas from all over the place, and their technical proficiency maybe is not 100% because that's not how they came at it, but you can get better at technical proficiency. It's very difficult to grow the appreciation for the subject if you've spent 2 decades saying, I don't like it.
Yes.
It doesn't like me. It's not what I do.
Isn't that Pavlov conditioning?
Yeah, very much so.
Right. So, and I think there's another interesting aspect of it when we talk about like science education itself. So you're talking about like mathematics being the language of the universe. And of course, the application of that language is really in science. So when we talk about like the development of science education itself, and this is very much should be informed when it comes to like the academic programs in the STEM fields, how do you foresee a paradigm shift also in sustainably improving science education, not only in the K-12 system, but also specifically for higher education in order to encourage many more people to be involved in the sciences?
And I think, again, it's if I think back to my high school biology class, and it was probably my least favorite. And it was, I was very good at it because I was very good at memorizing terms. I would read them 2 or 3 times, and I would remember them, and I still remember more of them than I care to admit.
Yes.
And where's the interest in that? I mean, it's almost
just memorization, right?
It's memorization. It's almost as interesting as looking at a deck of cards and trying to remember what order the cards were in.
Yes.
You don't get anything from that. And so I think what really got me interested in science was when I was reading books about what people were doing at the cutting edge. And I think that the efforts that various places are making, and we're doing it as well, to connect K-12 and undergraduate students to the research side and say, here's something that, we don't know the answer to. We have this skill set. Think of your science knowledge as a toolbox.
Yes.
This is our toolbox. We're going to try to figure this thing out. And you might look at it and say, well, I don't really care about that. Then you're probably in the wrong science. That's not going to be the science for you. But I think nearly everyone can find some science they do care about. I think many of us have relatives that have had various diseases that we wish could be cured.
Yes, definitely.
And so, it is pretty easy to find someone who would be really excited about the opportunity to be in a biological research lab if you can connect it to some part of their family story.
Yes.
For myself, what sort of got me interested initially was being interested in how the stars work. 'Cause I'd always, as a kid, looked at the stars and suddenly connecting me to all these questions we don't know the answer to. And it's great. I remember having a conversation with a high school student, said, well, why don't you just Google it? And I'm like, Google doesn't know the answer because humanity does not know the answer.
Yes.
and that was exciting, right? It was like, oh, you mean you really don't know the answer? I mean,
No.
nobody knows the answer to this. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to figure it out. And it might not be stars for you. It might not be curing cancer, but in some branch of science, there's a question that almost everyone finds interesting, and connecting people to the question and worrying about the memorization and the long list of details that you've got to get, the technical skills, let that come second. First connect to the interesting question, because I think humans by their very nature are curious.
And that's how you have inventions and improvements, right?
Is let that curiosity guide you first, and then the technical skill comes second. Don't do it in the reverse order where you have to have the technical skill before you're allowed to be curious, because it kills the creativity. All the creatives find something more interesting to do, something more fun, and you've got people who have memorized the full deck of cards but don't know how to play the game.
Okay. So, and now we're in the University of Tennessee Martin. So can you tell us about some of the initiatives that you've actually started in the sciences, and also all of the developments and improvements, including the infrastructure that's in the pipeline for the university?
Sure. So the biggest project I've been involved in, maybe the biggest project in recent university history, is we're building a new engineering and science building.
Yes.
And so I was very involved in the design of that building. Actually, I had not yet technically started the position, and I was being invited to the design meetings. As one of the lead designers said, we want you here because we would hate for you to come in and tell us you've changed our plans because you're now in charge.
Yes.
But one of the things I'm very proud of about that particular facility is we have a lot of space for collaboration between disciplines.
Yes.
And we have a lot of space for the students and the faculty to work together. That it's not a building where you come to, you go to your class, and then you leave. It's a building where you go to your class, you hang out with some of your peers, you maybe go to a research lab, work with some faculty, and then you can even have snacks and dinner there.
Well, they were talking about a Starbucks and maybe a Dunkin' Donut.
Yeah, we don't know what'll be there, but you'll be able to get coffee and snacks there, and it becomes your home away from your home, rather than just a place where you have classes. So that's been one of the large ones. Another facility that I'm currently working on that we're raising money for and hoping to build in the next 5 years is one that really does that tie-in between the technical trades, the four-year academics, and local industry. So under the one roof, we have 3 different academic institutions, one focused on trades, one a community college that focuses on the first couple of years of university, and then our 4-year programs, again, sort of collaborating together, letting folks have the different off-ramps into careers. If you don't want to do the college route, but you need the career technical training, you can get it there. If you need to get a little farther into your academic studies, but not all the way to a 4-year degree, you can do that. And of course, our 4-year engineering programs. At the same time, having local industry there lets us, one, find jobs for our students, which is always exciting.
Definitely.
But it keeps us plugged in as to what their needs are. Because sometimes we think we know what people need, and so we start making it only to find out that's not what they need anymore. And so having that ongoing conversation is really, really valuable. So that's what we're working on that side. We talked a little bit about K-12 STEM education. We have what we call it the STEM Center. And what it is it's led by some STEM faculty, and math professors, the director. And we design here on campus various exercises that uses the kinds of skills and the kind of thinking processes that we want a college student to have, but we design it to align with the state education standards for K-12 science. And then we bring the science teachers to campus, or the math teachers to campus, and we walk them through it. It was like, okay, this is what you're trying to accomplish. This is how it works. This is why it matters. And they actually do it here on campus so they can see how it works. They can ask any questions they want. And then we send them away with the lesson plan laid out, which saves the teacher's time. And it's already lined up to state standards, so they don't have to worry about that. The paperwork's done. And they actually get the equipment so that, some of our school systems are under-resourced compared to others. And so they have actual sets of equipment that they can use, and they don't have to go to their principal or their school system saying, we need to buy this equipment because it lines up with the standard. They have it. And so that's something we're very proud of. And at the same time, we're working on developing new academic programs. I mentioned talking about trying to stay plugged into what industry needs. So we have, in the fall of 22, we should be starting a new program in cybersecurity that we're very excited about. We're
very much needed.
Very much needed, and in the region even more than normal. And we're working on a program in construction. That's one of the industries locally that they're really struggling to find workforce. And we've launched recently a new program in mechanical engineering, which is.
And how is that differentiated from your other traditional program?
Our former program is it's an engineering degree that has various sub-concentrations. And one of the things we find with our students is locally, most industries know that our students are of quality and they have the background, and we have that reputation. When our students want to travel more nationally or globally, having that distinction of the degree title between Bachelor of Engineering and Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering really hones in on the area of expertise. And so even if the employer has not heard of the University of Tennessee at Martin, they have the assurance of knowing exactly what that student knows, so that they know what they can plug them in. And as our students become more, nationally and internationally mobile, as young professionals and established professionals, we really want them to feel served in that way. We don't want them to go out and say that, our university did not provide me with the opportunity that I want.
So you talk about like the sciences and of course mathematics. This is like internationally oriented, meaning everybody could collaborate in terms of like mathematics and sciences. So what do you think are like the prospects for international collaboration, whether it be in the teaching side, as you said, developing academic programs, or even for collaborative research? And so you would be talking about like some other projects that the university is involved in specifically for like sciences and mathematics.
I think we have a growing capacity there. One thing that we've been successful at over the past 4 years since I've been here is we have a more international faculty now. And that helps in various ways. Which makes it quite easy for someone to go to Europe or to Africa, Asia, and to collaborate. And I have collaborators on every continent except Antarctica.
Not yet.
There's like the penguins don't do the nuclear physics, and so I don't have them. And I know there's a field station down there, but they don't do quite the same thing I do. But there's a huge benefit to that, because you just never know what a student might be interested in or where an opportunity might be. With one of our sister institutions, Hirosaki in Japan, we have in the past sent engineering faculty over there along with some students, and they run 3 and 4 week courses, and that's been very successful. And in one really interesting case, we had a faculty opening here that we needed filled on fairly short notice. And we were able to get a faculty member at Hirosaki to come over here and teach electrical engineering for us for a semester. And there was some challenge with the different academic calendar, but the opportunity for our students was enormous. Obviously, the faculty member had a great opportunity to go and live and work in America for 6 months. And so it really was a win-win for everyone. And so we're really looking to expand those possibilities. And I think it's one of those that when you succeed a little bit, you get more success, and it just sort of snowballs and gets larger and larger. And we really think that we're early on in the stages of seeing that become a significant part of the university experience here.
So cumulatively, you would want to see some small successes being built so that it will eventually be a sustainable effort. Of course, you've also mentioned about the facilities in terms of like research, and maybe you can talk about like 2 areas where UTM is active, in Coon Creek and then in Reelfoot Lake, where you have research is being undertaken specifically in sciences.
And so, one of the things about, being in this particular region is that we are the only university within a fairly substantial geographic region. So there is a lake, Reelfoot Lake, that's about an hour away. And it was actually created during an earthquake. It has a very fascinating geologic history. But the university has some land out there, has a small field station where students and visiting researchers will actually come and stay. Not during the pandemic, but during non-pandemic times, they would stay, and they conduct various, research related to water ecology. There's quite a bit of wildlife. I know some of our ornithologists will go out there and do quite a bit of study in the field out there. And it's not just our faculty and our students, but we have faculty from half a dozen different universities that will use that over the course of several years. And so that's our Reelfoot experience. And we very recently have acquired Coon Creek, which is, as someone put it, it's almost like Disney World for dinosaurs. It's, all of these wonderful fossils that are located in West Tennessee, and our university now has control of that, and
access to it.
The director of that facility is in our geology department, and we are running summer internships down there. And again, once the pandemic has passed, it will be quite substantial, I believe, how much is going down there. And you'll start seeing it, I think, even in some of our recruiting material, because for me and for many that I know, their first little taste of science was a fascination with dinosaurs. I can still remember playing with the plastic dinosaurs when I was 4 or 5 years old, wanting to see these bones that I would see in the magazines and the museum.
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. And now, you know, I mean, hopefully we're not bringing them to life like in Jurassic Park, but you can go with our faculty and actually, you know, hunt for these things. And that's going to be, that's an experience that just wasn't available when I was a student. The real focus on experiential learning and that science, again, is not just a list of facts that you memorize, but it's actually something you do. It's taking knowledge and applying it and trying to understand new things. And that's something that, you know, we're doing on the paleontology side with our geologists at Coon Creek, our biologists, environmental science and natural resource people are doing at RILFA, and we're doing it in our labs and classrooms constantly now.
Yes. And so let's just for the last discussion, two very pressing issues, current facts and affairs that we're involved in, which is one is renewable energies and the need really to feed the demand for energy of the world, basically, and of course the concern about climate change. So how do you think that could be addressed specifically? Because you have these academic institutions that are going to be like the incubation of new technologies and new science knowledge, scientific knowledge, in order to address these two pressing issues that we are facing, I mean, for mankind and for the earth.
Yeah, so I think, you know, that's going to be a bigger push year over year as we move forward. And one of the, I use the cybersecurity program as an example. We're excited. We have this new program. I think in 10 to 15 years, cybersecurity programs at universities will be almost like English and biology programs. Everyone's going to have one because the need is so great, the demand is so big that there's going to be that's going to happen. that it's going to happen. And I think, you know, we're probably within the generation, we could see the same push for climate science and renewable energies, that it will become such a pressing issue that the need will be so large that you'll see everyone getting involved. I would say for many universities like mine right now, it's a particular interest of some individuals. Like we do have a faculty member, for example, who works on electric vehicles, and you'll sometimes see him with this autonomous electric vehicle, very small electric car. You can't ride on it. You could put stuffed animals on it. But you'll see it driving around our campus. And he'll set up obstacles. And I've watched him through my windows where there was one obstacle for some reason it wasn't picking up. It just kept running over. It was so much fun to watch. But that's one of the
what scientific experiments are all about.
It was, he eventually figured out what was wrong in the programming, that it wasn't picking up, right? You need things to not work in order to fix them. But that's where his motivation is coming, is knowing that, you know, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles that, you know, will be more efficient are going to be absolutely key players in that future. And I think you will see that grow into full-blown programs with full university support and interest behind it, not just at this institution or that institution, but I think globally it's going to be a big push.
So of course we can talk about like the whole day. I think about sciences, mathematics, and physics, biology, chemistry, all of those fascinating physical sciences, as well as its applications in engineering, and still not be through with half of what needs to be said and done. So can you give us your last words, Dr. Robinson, about how to encourage really young people to be involved, at the very least, to be interested in the sciences and mathematics, and to be informed about their practical application to our everyday lives?
I think it's important to be able to draw parallels to what a student's experiencing in the classroom and the world around them. The world around them is real, right? And anything that happens in the classroom, if it feels too isolated, if it feels too sheltered, and there's not a connection between that and the real world, it becomes a question of, why are we doing this? Is this a waste of time? Will I ever use this? And so I think that is absolutely critical. And then to the extent that one can, depending on the students and their interest, to help folks understand that it's going to be their world, that, you know, 25, 30 years from now, the shape of the world is being determined by my generation. And then, you know, after that, it's really going to be what ideas they can come up with to fix our message, what things that, you know, what are we doing to fix the message before us, what opportunities can we set up for them to actually take big leaps forward? But it's going to be their story. And I think for many young people, there is that excitement to be able to take control of a narrative. I mean, you see that as children grow up. They really want that freedom to be able to tell their own story and to do their own thing.
Creative imagination of children.
Yeah. And to really encourage that creativity and the curiosity. That one of my few deep successes as a parent that I love is I know my son, as many children did, love to ask why. And I promised him that, I would never get tired of that question. And I would do my best to answer. And sometimes we were talking about quantum chromodynamics and how the nucleus worked and held itself together because he asked why.
Yes.
And I think he was doing it to be silly.
Yeah.
But he knew that there was always more questions that could be asked. And I think encouraging that in our young people is absolutely essential for the future of our world and of science and engineering and mathematics.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Robinson, for that very exciting and interesting discussion. And I hope that our young people especially have been much more encouraged to be in the field of the STEM because this is a field that really needs more people to be involved in. So we'll be right back.
AAA Live!
Inyong napakinggan si Attorney Amihan April ALCAZAR.
AAA Live!
Naway kinapulutan ninyo ng impormasyon at kaalaman ang talakayan ng mga ekspertong nakapanayam mula sa iba't ibang larangan ng edukasyon.
AAA Live!
Ang AAA Live ay mapakikinggan at mapanonood sa Katipunan Channel tuwing araw ng Miyerkules alas 7 hanggang alas 8 ng gabi.
Where your academic goals will be advanced and achieved. AAA Live!
Hanggang sa muling pagtatanghal.